Welcome to Permaculture Vision's course video on sector analysis. I'll show you how and why the sector analysis is created, how it fits with permaculture strategies and other design tools. We will look at lots of examples and give you a quick formula for assessing which sectors will have the greatest impact on your design. It's not a standalone aspect of permaculture design, but it's a powerful tool when used in conjunction with zoning and the creation of a web of relationships of the components within the design. The sector analysis is governed by the natural energies, such as gravity and sunlight, as well as some internal energies, such as heating systems, animals, and machinery. We usually draw up our sectors first and then set about creating the zones, and then placing the components within these sectors and zones to create functional connections. I've done quite a few designs and I've discovered that we need to do that sector analysis first. The sector analysis is like the first filter of a series of 3 filters. It helps you to make decisions. The other filters are zoning and functional relationships. But Bill Mollison would say that a design is like a bicycle, and the riding of that bicycle is the ongoing design process. In practice, we do make compromises, but as we get more skilled, we learn to avoid bumps, get faster at adjusting the gears and the steering. So riding a bicycle is a complex set of decisions, and so is designing. Design needs to be practiced, and it needs to adapt to change. There are a couple of permaculture principles that demand that we do a sector analysis, and they are: how are we going to catch and store energy? How are we going to integrate components of a design rather than segregate them? What biological resources can we use? And what patterns will imitate nature, become more energy efficient, and reduce our losses? And it's nice to have a stress-free yield. That is, a yield that we're not forcing the system to create, but it happens naturally. And in the end, you'll get a higher total yield. So what free energies can you use? At this point, I'll encourage you to stop and think about the free natural energies that you have available to you right now. What losses can you reduce? So where is the wastage in the system? Have a quick think about what wastage have you got where you live right now. What yield is stressful? What are you searching to get? And you have to work hard at it. And how can that stress be reduced? So if we want to increase the total yield, all we need to do is to boost the existing yield that comes from natural energies and plug the existing losses. Imagine if you had a tool shop like this. It's beautiful. We can use natural energies in the tool shop: the sunlight, the ventilation systems that come from the wind, maybe funneled along between 2 buildings. We want to look at the easiest way to do this. How do the sectors work? Well, we have external and internal energies to consider. Then we need to think about the impact, the benefit and the risk of those energies, and how responsive can the components of the design be. So how mobile is something? If it wants to be warmed, can it go and sit in the sun? Can you give something self-governance? Here's some different energy types. There's 6 types. Let's have a quick look at kinetic energy. Kinetic energy comes from when I'm riding a bicycle, or the wind, or the chicken is doing the weeding. Thermal energy occurs when the chicken is nesting, sitting on eggs and warming them up, or when the sun is coming into a solar oven, or on a bigger scale, the solar passive architecture. Electrical energy occurs with solar power, when lightning. Electromagnetic scares me. The rays from the sun, we can't feel them, those electromagnetic rays. They'll burn our skin, but then they're also useful in drying the clothes. The chemical warmth from the fire and from the sun helps to ripen the fruit. And then there's nuclear energy. It occurs in the center of the Earth's core, and that's what gives us geothermal energy and sunlight from the sun. So we have external energies and internal energies. The external are the big things like the sun and the breezes, but they might also be noise and privacy issues. The internal energies are things from the animals and the people and the systems that we set up, such as heaters and ventilation systems. You can apply sector planning anywhere, in a workspace or on a small balcony, in your office, on your office desk. As Van Gogh was painting his room, he must have been woken naturally by the sunlight, and he must have read by natural light at the desk there underneath the window. And you can see the shaving mirror is right next to the window, so he could use the natural light. His towel is hanging on the back of the door. Maybe that was the best place to catch the breeze and dry the towel. And he could open the window and the door to allow some air to go through the room, but not much. In this workplace, sitting at a desk here, we've got natural light on the right-hand side, which is not bad, but the back of the desk is blocking some of that light. There's noise behind the worker, and there's a cold draft at her feet, whereas the desk is blocking the ventilation, the warm air coming from the side. So we did a quick sector analysis. We looked at where the different energies were coming from. And if we flip the desk now, the worker has natural light on her right-hand side. The noise is behind the back of the desk. The cold draft is blocked by the drawers, and she has warm air at her feet. The kitchen is a dangerous workplace. Important sector considerations are foot traffic, product flow, people bringing resources in and taking them out, noises, the wind and the flames, the exhaust, the steam, the rise of splatter or splashes. In this example of the Chinese gong, the wood is a trip hazard at her feet. The flames are small and efficient. This is a winter kitchen, so it serves to keep the worker warm, and the room is warmed by it. And the cleverness of the gong is that the exhaust goes under a bed and into the next room, and then up a chimney. The gong is a highly efficient cooking system. See how it uses small pieces of wood, natural windfalls. I'm going to spend a second here just showing you how the gong works. You can see how there's the wok on the left-hand side. The chimney goes through a herringbone-shaped system underneath the bed, and then it goes up a chimney. Here's an old one from 600 years on the left-hand side there, and there's the modern one from just a couple of years ago in a traditional village in northern China. But let's get back to that kitchen. What are the energy sectors in a kitchen? The external energies are light and maybe wind, breezes through the window. That's a problem if it contains dust or pollution. The internal energies are greater. There's heat from the stove, there's movement of people, noise, and maybe a small risk of flood if you leave the sink to overflow. But there are sectors you could identify even in a tool shed. The sectors would be light, foot traffic, chemicals, trip hazards because people might leave tools on the ground, and sometimes flames. Well, what would the sectors be for a herb spiral? They would be the sunlight and the shade, and the temperature from the thermal mass in those rocks and the moisture levels in the soil. What sectors would you find in a playground? Look at the light and shade, but the breezes and the warmth and the foot traffic is an important risk because you don't want people going in front or behind a swing. Children often do. So what are the home sector factors? We've got sun, shade, wind, breezes, and you might have the risk of flood waters, storm waters. There'll be pollution, and then there will be noise and views. Traditionally, in permaculture, we would do a pie chart to express the windows of that sector. So the sunlight and the shadows would be shown as an arc across the map. The fire threat is shown as an arc or an area that it comes from. We also show cold winds and flood waters. Many clients want to maintain a view, but they also want privacy. So you've got these other factors. And view nearly always equals wind. So if you're going to try and put in a sector that's just for the view, remember that it could be a pretty nasty wind. Here's a computer-generated diagram of the sector by Gail, one of my students, and she's showing where the cool breezes can come from and where her summer sun arc is quite broad and her winter sun is smaller. For our site here, we're in an enclosed village in the foothills of a mountain. So we've got the winter sun to the north, the top of the map here, but we've also got a small amount of winter sun can come through a gully called Windy Gully. And of course, Windy Gully is full of cold wind in winter. Here it is expressed on the map. You can do sector analysis even on a larger property, but if that property had several mountains in it, so if you were doing a council region, then it will be more generalized and it won't take into consideration microclimates. On the rural retreat, I looked at sunlight, fire threats, cold winds, flood waters, not such a big issue with a mountainous area, but stormwater runoff might be. And there were big habitat corridors. There was quite a bit of thermal mass from the rocky hills behind the retreat, and the access ways, security, privacy and noise were also sectors to consider. On a farm, you'll have very similar considerations, but you will have probably less concern with noise and privacy. The community garden design will also have a large area or a very intense sector for the resources access, where the resources come in and people come in and resources go flowing back out through that small gate usually. There'll probably be a reduced risk of fire because most community gardens are surrounded by homes, and hopefully there will be less flood water, but often a community garden is allowed on areas where the risk is high, such as floodwater risk. There will always be security and privacy issues, and maybe you do want noise. You want it to be a busy place to reduce the risk of vandalism. The garden that I designed for the local technical education institution has the same sector concerns, but actually needs less privacy and more visual connection to the rest of the site, so that students who are not necessarily studying permaculture can watch what's going on. So it needed to be open. The large hedge-like plantings needed to be on the side away from passing traffic. In a city, there's a lot of energies, a lot of resources moving around. You need to decide, where's the winter sun, where's the summer sun, where's the wildlife access? The fire threat will be lower possibly, and floodwaters have usually been mitigated, but there's a lot of other energies to consider. So how do we go about the sector analysis process? I suggest you identify the external and internal energies of a design, and then try to calculate the impact, the importance of those energies, whether they're a benefit or a risk. And then you might want to consider how responsive is the design or the components of a design to that particular energy. External energies include sunlight, wind, fire up towards a ridge, but it can also be in a firestorm. In that case, you're not going to be able to identify one particular sector. You might consider the likeliness of a firestorm based on the shape of the topography and the fuel load of nearby properties. Other external energies include frost or snowdrifts, surface runoff, pollution, salty winds, thermal mass. In this picture, there's a massive thermal mass to that tiny little dwelling in Toledo. There was one tiny old building there on the right-hand side, and a massive thermal mass in the skyscraper beside it. And there's also some reflected light. Have a closer look at your shadows, because the morning, midday and afternoon shadows can overlap. They combine to make a cooler area. And this cooler area will have less energy, so needs to be considered in the design. And another factor that you might need to research before you can do a proper sector analysis is the wind. But this is one of the most beautiful and useful graphs that you will ever use in permaculture, the wind rose. It tells you the direction and the intensity of the wind. Internal energies include heating systems, electronics, machinery and animals. Once we have determined the different sectors, we need to evaluate how important these sectors are, how powerful is the risk, or how much can we harness and benefit from that energy source. Another factor to consider is how much can the system respond to or accommodate the risk. Trees will bend in the wind, grapevines seek the sunlight, but some factors, such as the likely fire front, demands our attention and preparation. For those sectors, we will want some hard data and prediction We want the design to be responsive, so we need to include fire breaks, a reduced fuel load, access for firefighting equipment, and fire retardant plants. This painting is called Shearing the Rams. It was painted in 1890 by Australian artist Tom Roberts. He shows the sheep shearers working in a timber shed. What are the external energies? They're cold wind and sunlight. The sunlight is their only light source. What are the internal energies? The internal energies are the workers and the rams. How responsive is the system to these energies? Probably pretty good. The workers look comfortable, the access gates are working well, and the resources are moving efficiently. So we would need to determine the external and internal energies of a system. We would calculate the impact and likeliness of each of these energies. And then we would estimate how responsive is the system to these energies. We want to prioritize the risks. We want to meet our needs and minimize our losses. In summary, the sector analysis is a design tool that's used with zoning and the functional connection of the components. The sector analysis may change over time because microclimates will develop as the system matures. And so you need to revisit the design from time to time in the same way that you would be riding a bicycle, make changes, accommodate the changes of the landscape. We can practice sector awareness on a regular basis. We can start on a small space, such as your bedroom, your desk, your bathroom, or a tool shed, and then start doing sector plans for working areas, living areas, and larger designs. Enjoy!